Good morning. We are here for, I guess, what's kind of become an annual thing here in Worthington, and we've done this at the Worthington Fire Hall for a few years now. This is our annual legislative breakfast / eggs and issues, although I guess we don't have any eggs. It's our, coffee and donuts event. And before we start, Jamie Salinas is our executive director of Forward Worthington. He's standing over there. He asked me to mention that Scooters graciously donated the coffee this morning, so thank you to them. We have, of course, donuts as well. Randy Davis from Channel 3 is here, and this is now streaming live, this event, on the YouTube channel. So if for some reason you want to get up and use the restroom, you cannot miss a second of the action. You can go to the YouTube channel for Studio 3, I guess, is the channel that it's under. So those little formalities we've taken care of. We're going to talk about the start of the legislative session, which is right around the corner. And, of course, each of the three individuals up here, the lawmakers, they have been with us now for a little bit of time. Marge is the newest, but, of course, she's starting her second term now. And, of course, Senator Weber and Joe, you can say, are veterans of this legislature. Going to be a little bit different this year. Of course, kind of a divided, not divided. As we got the Democrats in the governor's seat. We got a tie yet, and still to be settled out, I guess. So we're going to talk about some of those things. And I guess where we're going to start is we're going to have each lawmaker kind of give an overview, kind of an opening remarks, if you will, about what they think may happen in the next few months, and then we'll take some questions and go from there. So just to do it, I guess, simply, why don't we just start directly to my left, and Representative Schumacher, if you want to get this party started, go for it.
All right, woo. That really got it started. That's great. I'm Representative Joe Schumacher. I represent just to the west of this area, have been serving since 2011. This will be the most unique session that we're going into. I had hopes that when this got organized that we'd have more answers than we did at the point when the invite went out for this event, and it seems now that we have even fewer answers than what we might have had even a month ago on how things will be going this year and direction-wise and just what we'll be able to see. We have a projected budget deficit right now that we're planning on, but we'll get a clearer picture in another month or so on what the budget that we actually have to balance off of is looking like. And so I am somewhat optimistic that it'll be a slightly rosier picture, but then after seeing some of the sales pieces that have gone through over the last month or so, it may not be as rosy as I was hoping it would be with that. And so we still may be facing quite a deficit to deal with, especially in the out years for that. In the new organization for the session coming up, I have been appointed as the chair for the Human Services Committee. And so I'll be spending a great deal of time trying to wrestle with that nearly $40 billion budget and coming up with something there. And so it's in the phase right now of just trying to learn everything that is involved with that budget and where we can go and what needs to be fixed and what we can possibly fix of what needs to be fixed and deal with those sorts of things. And so I'm happy to be here, happy that some folks showed up this morning to hear and ask some questions, and we'll pass this party on to Bill now.
And if anyone can keep a party going, it's Senator Bill Weber.
Oh, yes, I'm really known as the party animal, you bet. But no, it is going to be an interesting time. But good morning, Worthington and Nobles County. Glad to be here this morning, and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, we are living history right now. The House started out with only the second time in the history of the state being tied after the election. And now with the one of the other party not taking their seat for a while there, for sure, the Republicans have a 67-66 majority. Well, for many years in the Senate, we've been operating, both parties have operated with a one-seat majority. We did for 6 years, then we had cooperation of 2 independents the last 2 years of that, and now the Democrats have had a one-seat majority. A week ago, Senator Dietzick from Minneapolis passed away. And I certainly extend my sympathies to her family. And Senator Dietzick was a very gracious person, was a good person to work with. And we obviously didn't agree on a number of things, but she was always respectful and made an effort to reach out to the opposition to her party, much more than what we see happening today. Anyway, with her passing, we are now at a 33-33 tie. And so a week from Tuesday, the Senate will meet. We called into session along with the House. We will have to reorganize because that reorganization happens every 2 years. And right now, you cannot elect a president of the Senate with 33 votes. The lieutenant governor will preside over the opening of the session, but she will not be able to vote. So I don't know. We may be in business a week from Tuesday, and we may not be in business a week from Tuesday. For the benefit of the state, we might be better off if we're not in business. But the reality of it is, one would have thought that the current majority leader would have contacted my leader and said, how do we make this work? Crickets. He hasn't heard a word from her. So at this point, I'm not quite sure what will happen. And so it'll be interesting times. The special election for Senator Dietzick's seat has been slated for the end of this month, and there's no question, in light of the district in which she represents, it will be another Democrat coming, and so at that point, there will be they'll go back to a 34-33 majority, unless a high level of consciousness affects the other side, and they decide to join us and expel the cat burglar from Woodbury. And so I don't know what's all going to happen. I guess the old age-old comment, stay tuned, is in play here. And but the reality of it is, if we aren't actually organized until the end of January, our adjournment date remains the same, 19th of May. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, Marge. I don't know if you've got any cat burglar remarks in yours, but go for it.
Thanks, everyone, for having us here today, and I appreciate all the support that I've received from Nobles County, and I am excited and honored to serve again for the next 2 years as your legislator. The committees I served in the last 2 years was capital investments and transportation. I will be serving on those 2 committees again this year. I will be the vice chair of the capital investments, and I will also be serving on education policy, which I am new to that committee. Senator Weber mentioned that we were tied after the election. We had 2 lawsuits that went through. One, the person said that he wasn't going to serve because he wasn't living in the district. So that election will be with Senator Dietzick's open seat on the 28th of January. There's another one where there were 20 ballots that were thrown away, and we are pushing hard for that to have a re-election also. So right now we're in the majority when session starts for a week or so we'll see how that goes. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of fraud that's going on in our state. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's getting over $1 billion. And I don't know if any of you heard that we've been pushing for that for 2 years for sure, that there's a lot of this going on and we need to look at it. So our governor did say yesterday that he's going to put a special committee together to oversee that, but it is all the people that have been overseeing the fraud in the first place, so I don't know what good that committee is going to do, but it's definitely going to be, we had 2 years of getting everything thrown at us when they were in the supermajority there, so we'll see how it goes now. It's going to be an interesting 2 years again.
All right. Thank you, Marge. Where we'll go now, I think, well, typically in the past, we've done these forums and we've had people submit questions, and I don't believe we've had any questions submitted ahead of time as of yet. This is not a candidates debate type of event where people are going to be timed or anything like that, which is probably a relief to Senator Weber. I digress.
Bad reputation you get
I love it. I love it.
So I think what we'll do is, I mean, if you don't mind, people can just ask, raise their hand, and I'll call them like the teacher that I'm not. My wife is the teacher in the family. I'll call on you, and I'll repeat the question so Randy can hear it and pick it up on his microphone, and then we can just answer questions. We'll handle this pretty informally, I think, unless any of the candidates have any objection to that. Candidates, you're not a candidate anymore, you're an official. Anyway, who wants to start? Yes, sir.
Ryan, welcome, Joe. I think it's only one other time that there's a bigger forecast budget deficit than what we're facing this biennium. And I think I was just becoming commissioner when the tails of that were coming off, and it wasn't real pretty. So where do you think, nobody wants to cut, that they have to be cut. I don't think anyone wants to raise taxes, but I don't know what's your opinion of that probably. Where do you think the cuts are going to come from? I mean, we have county program aid, we got local government aid, you know, it's kind of been brought up to a pretty good level, and we just get more and more and more things that we have to do that are not paid for, so just kind of what your comments are about that.
You get that, Randy? In a nutshell, we have a budget deficit coming up. Where do you cut? How do you address that deficit? And I'll let you guys draw straws over there as to who wants to start.
Okay, well, I'll talk, and if,
Okay.
you know, if you're lucky, I'll last the hour, so.
We have until around 9.
No. But no, you know, the reality of it is, Gene, they passed a budget that was increased by 40% for the biennium the last time. There is enough money to cut. They went through an $18 billion surplus, added another $10 billion in taxes and fees, and yet our roads aren't fixed, aren't scheduled to be totally fixed. Mental health remains a problem for the state, for counties especially, because of as you mentioned, mandates that you get, unfunded mandates. They bragged about the tremendous increase in the per pupil formula that they gave our E12, our schools, and yet our schools are struggling financially because, again, of all the unfunded mandates that got placed on them. I have never seen such a reckless 2 years in the state, and this is going to be my 13th term coming up, but never have I seen such recklessness with the people's money as what I have seen the past 2 years. And, you know, at this point, in the Senate anyway, there were our 8 state senators of the other party who now call themselves Blue Dog Democrats to bring a level of moderation back to the discussion. My question is, where the hell were you the last 2 years when you could have stood up and done something to stop these problems from developing? We'll see. I mean, I'm hopeful that they mean what they say, but, and I understand, it takes a lot of courage to stand up to your party and say, I'm not going to do that. But, you know, when they passed that horrendous bill at the end of session last year, I was on the conference committee. I was the only Republican on the tax conference committee. Our tax chair sat down next to me and she said, I apologize, Bill. I know this is not the way it should be, but there was nothing I could do. And I looked at her and I said, oh, yes, there is. And she sort of raised her eyebrows. I said, you could have pulled a Fate too, because Senator Fate, for the previous day, had abandoned the floor for 18 hours, stopping any work on legislation until he got what he wanted for his Uber and Lyft drivers. That they left him get by with, but she, with all her years of experience, couldn't stand up and say, this isn't right, we're not going to do this. I said, I don't buy that, Ann. And we have a good working relationship, don't get me wrong. But I was put out enough that day, I wasn't going to take any excuses. And so we'll have to see if those Blue Dog Democrats are going to live up to what they say. I think right now, you stop and think about the hundreds of millions, almost $1 billion of fraud that we've experienced in this state. There are plenty of ways to cut the budget without affecting the vital services of your constituents and my constituents out here. And they just need to have the courage to step forward and do that. But you're right, it's in excess of $5 billion by the end of the next biennium. How you can go from an $18 billion surplus to that kind of a deficit in that short order, it points to the mismanagement that we have seen these last 2 years.
Would either of you two like to add anything to Senator Weber's comments?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with Senator Weber. This is not going to be easy or fun to be the parent in the room and say, no, we can't keep spending where we shouldn't be spending and funding programs that we shouldn't be funding. So we're just going to have to sit down and take a big pencil and go through stuff and hopefully work together with the Democrats and change some of this stuff so that our state is going. We're hurting businesses, we're hurting schools, and we just can't keep doing this. People keep telling me they're moving or looking to move to other states. We want people to stay here, and we can't keep raising taxes to think that's going to make everything better for everyone, because it's just making it worse.
That was more concise than I was expecting, but that was a compliment. Looking at this overall, my first term was when we were dealing with that budget deficit too. That was about $6 billion at that time, and just a little context, I guess, if you want to have a little bit of a silver lining or a positive perspective on some of that. The dollar was worth a whole lot more 14, 15 years ago when we had that deficit then. The state budget at that time was under $30 billion, where now it's at $70 billion or so. And so just in context of apples to apples, there's a lot of differences there. Marge talked about the rampant amount of fraud that's been found in the state by different pieces. If we can clean that up, that helps push this out. Also, at that time, that $6 billion deficit was for that incoming year, where we actually have a surplus of, $300 or $400 million for this first budget. It's the out years that deficit comes, and the inflationary pieces are baked in now too, where it wasn't the last time we had a deficit like this. And so even former Speaker Hortman has said that, well, if we just take the inflationary piece out, that's half of the deficit there. Kind of one of those things where it worked for them to bake in the inflation 2 years ago, and now it's inconvenient, so they switch it out and say we don't need to look at that. So I don't see the same kind of things happening or even being talked about that we had before. I think it's from a kind of fiscally responsible point. I think we're in a good position here where we don't have to make bad or really awful decisions to balance the budget. And at the same time, it does give legislators enough pause because it's not just an open bank account like we've seen for the last 2 years. And so I have a lot of optimism in those pieces. Of course, I know where the target's going to be is in the human services budget with that, because part of the growth has been attributed to the things that are in the human services. And so we're trying to understand where those have come up. Some of the biggest pieces are in the aging services and in the disability services. And in the aging services, we're actually seeing a decrease in the spending that's gone on for these 2 years. But in the disability services, we've seen an increase. And it's a question of where that mix is. And so we're feverishly looking to get to a better understanding on what that piece is of it overall. But I'm optimistic we'll be able to get this settled. 15 years ago, we had that longest shutdown in the country's history, over $1.5 billion in tax increases versus $1.5 billion in delayed spending. We still spent the money, we just delayed it in the end. We don't have that option, not that it was an option before, but before we had there was the ability for the courts to order that certain services stay open during a shutdown period, and now the Supreme Court has knocked that option off the table. So if it's shut down, it's shut down. There's no essential services like we were able to do last time, and so there's a lot more reason to get to work and get to work right and quickly.
Anybody else got anything? Yes, Mr. Robinson.
Representative Fogelman, you're on the Capital Investment Committee. Can you give an estimate of how many requests are pending for bonding? 4,000 or 5,000?
Oh, there's lots, and there'll be the same and more coming. I have no idea what the number is.
I think it's multiple thousands.
There's,
By the way, to both of you, I forwarded a number of bills to your desk this week, so.
If you haven't checked your email box yet, yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things, needs still exist. Our communities are 125 to 150 years old. There are many infrastructure items that have lived their usefulness and beyond, to be honest about it. And quite frankly, the bureaucrats continue to make these projects more and more expensive for us out here to begin with. And I am firmly convinced that we have many, many intelligent people up there that just aren't real smart. And they go to the extreme as far as design and what have you, when sometimes it isn't at all necessary. And quite frankly, when you talk about water, issues of water and wastewater and the public utilities, many of them should get out here and spend a year or two in the field before they go up there and start drafting regulations. Because then maybe they'd understand what they're supposed to accomplish.
Anyone else? Mr. Metz is ready to go today.
No. This question kind of relates to what Steve brought up. Been a lot of projects that have been pushed off, and local entities have the option for the local option sales tax. Worthington's done that a couple times. We've done it in transportation. Neighboring counties done it for jail. Been some talk about pulling some of that authority back at the legislature. We gotta get these projects done somehow, but done with sales tax. What's your thoughts on that?
All right.
Start.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of local option sales tax as just a general rule. As a merchant as well, it's so tough to do that. And if this is supposed to be for public good stuff, the state should be coming forward, and that's on us. And that's why we get the angry emails near the end of session and the phone calls about why we're not getting our job done on the basic things. But we also don't have the votes to just do the basic things in the bonding piece anymore, because there is money in other places. But if the state's not going to be as a whole working on the essential projects, and the locals have to put it up anyway, put the money up for it anyway, I would prefer to see a better route than the local option sales tax, just from a competitive standpoint and from a needs standpoint. If I can afford to go somewhere where there isn't the sales tax on that, and versus the people who don't have an option to leave town to buy something, then it's hurting those that it's more regressive in that way, and thinking about it that way. So I guess as a good politician, answer yes and no on that for you. So
It's hard not to say yes or no on that. It's just hard because when you're adding more taxes, you're going to drive more people out. We have to look at what needs to be done versus wants also. So there's that aspect to it too. It's a tough road.
I don't anticipate that much will change in regards to that. Maybe process will change somewhat. When you have, number one, government that politically is so close in terms of the numbers, and the budget problems that are on the horizon, I don't think that we'll see a lot of major changes, even in that regard. So if we were going into this session with the kind of surplus that we had before, et cetera, my thought might be different. But right now, I think, I've got a couple of bills where I'm going to deal with estate tax issues and that type of thing, and to raise the level before estates are taxed. But, I think we need to consider what to do. I had an individual from the Department of Revenue in my office a year ago, and we were going over, I'm on the tax expenditure committee, because anytime you cut taxes, it's considered an expense for state government. And so, and I said to him, I said, at the federal level, it's been proven time and time again that when taxes are cut, the tax revenue actually increases. I said, what about the state level? He said, well, we don't have any numbers that indicate that. I said, well, you know why that is, don't you? He looked at me, and I said, the state of Minnesota's never cut taxes. So, that's why there's no information in Minnesota to substantiate that. But, and of course, now, I think had we taken the time when we had the surplus and actually cut taxes, we might not be, in a couple of years, wouldn't be in the position we're going to be in if nothing changes.
I want to follow up on that local option sales tax comment. That don't confuse a local option sales tax with a state mandated tax. Local option sales tax are approved by the residents, voted on and approved for the projects that are being presented, as opposed to what comes out of St. Paul.
Yep. That's right.
Yes, sir.
You guys explain to me why we, the people of Minnesota, don't get a chance to vote on certain issues, like, for instance, the abortion thing, the flag, and especially the marijuana thing. This marijuana thing, legalizing in Minnesota is gonna be a disaster. We got 3 nieces that live in Colorado. We got one that's trying to survive because of guys that rear-ended her and destroyed, but we don't get to vote why.
About, the question has to do with how come voters don't get to decide on issues such as abortion and marijuana are the 2 issues you cited.
yeah, that it's unfortunate, and I think in all the examples that you brought up, the flag, the abortion and marijuana, there were efforts to try and make those more of a constitutional amendment. That's the only option that in Minnesota we have. That's in our Constitution. We're not an initiative and referendum state like in South Dakota, where they have that option to petition that. The only option to do those sorts of things in Minnesota is through a constitutional amendment, for the most part. Or I think there was one effort on the flag to have a non-binding vote on it, or something like that, and so people could feel like they have a voice, but it's also non-binding. So It's more just an exercise than anything else. And, yeah, that's the reason why. It's not that the legislatures are preventing it. It's just not in our Constitution that we have that option.
Really, it's sad, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's just gonna bring disaster. Look what just happened in Wyndham the other night, so.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna get worse.
The other thing I think we need to remember is you know, I think that legalizing marijuana, recreational marijuana would be defeated in Minnesota. And I think that's why the other side would have never left to get to that point. Being a pro-life senator, I would be concerned about bringing that to the ballot because I don't think it would pass in Minnesota. And if it becomes a constitutional right, then there's never going to be much that we can do in that regard. You know, quite frankly, I am convinced as I sit here today that the reason we lost the majority in the Senate was the Supreme Court decision which overturned Roe versus Wade. You get to the metro area, that is a big, big issue, unfortunately, and not in the way it is for us out here. So,
Other questions? Mr.
I'm
Divovich?
glad you said you're a pro-life senator. What about the new law that requires new coverage for abortions and abortion-related services in Minnesota, and also gender-affirming care as well?
yeah, it was, I think even majority of people believe that the abortion law that they passed went too far. I know that in some local people who, you know, they said to my wife, well, we're not for abortion, but we think everybody has that right to do it. And she informed them of how far this went, and they said, well, no, that's not what we supported. And, well, yeah, it is what you supported because, you know, you voted for the governor who signed it into law. And so I think there are a lot of people that were taken aback by that. But it was, well, I'm just going to say it. You know, quite frankly, there was a time when all of our churches were against abortion. Now you have to search for a church that's against abortion. And I think it's time that, you know, we as individuals not only went to government, got involved with our churches as well and said, what's going on? Why are we supporting elements that, quite frankly, we believe are wrong? And so, you know, and I know they always say you're not supposed to mix politics and religion, but let's face it, our laws are based on Judeo-Christian principles. So.
Yes, sir.
Changing the subject a little bit, obviously, the rural economy and agriculture mirrors the current situation in the state budget. Seems to be agriculture's heading down the same road. What's positive or negative for agriculture in this upcoming session?
Positive or negative for agriculture?
Let's start.
Well, I think it's going to be just like small business and anything else. It's going to be a rocky road, and we have to do some things to change, and that's going to be changing things with our taxes and changing our environment to make things more welcoming for everybody. I think that small businesses are just important as anything else for our economy, as well as farming or anything else. So we are going to have to sit down and look at what's going to help everybody to have more money in their pocket to spend so that people are prosperous in Minnesota.
Yeah, and you reminded me of the one thing that makes me less optimistic about this upcoming budget deficit, because 15 years ago, it was the ag economy that ensured that we had a $6 billion deficit instead of a $10 billion deficit to deal with. Because the ag economy was so strong at that time, it really held the rest of the state up. Of course, the people in the metro forget that as they spend and spend and spend. But back to my opening comments, we just don't know this year what any issue is going to have, what traction they're going to have. I think there's some positivity in the makeup of the legislature and who's going to be running things that we don't, some of the policies that were passed that hurt agriculture as a whole over the last 2 years, that those policies can be kind of worked with to improve the overall industry. They're not going to be able to go away, but we will have to spend a lot more time and effort these next 2 years to bring forward some reasonableness to the policies, especially in agriculture, that we've seen, and try to find the handful of reasonable people on these issues to get some of that, some of the policies that have been put in place kind of reimagined there to a certain extent. And so all that to say is there should be reason to be optimistic on what can be done with agriculture, as with any industry, but it's going to take a lot of work on our part to get that to happen.
I think it's important to remember that in terms of the ag economy, there's a lot more influences at the national level than there are at the state level. The one thing that the state can do is obviously to promote the products that are grown in Minnesota, be it the grains, the livestock, and what have you, and that is done through various trade missions, and I know that I have never participated in them, but there is a need for that type of thing to occur. When agriculture and the agricultural processing is the second largest business in the state of Minnesota, it's things that you have to invest money in to promote and what have you. The crop prices and that type of thing on a national basis, that's what really dictates what we get here. And let's face it, out in greater Minnesota, we're sort of at the bottom end of the pricing structure, depending on where you are in relationship to location, to terminals, and that type of thing. The other element that has been present, is that has helped is quite frankly, ethanol production in Minnesota, which has utilized a lot of the corn that we've produced. There's people out there that are anti-ethanol production. And yet, at the same time, I think it was recently announced, Japan is buying a large amount of ethanol because they recognize that their concern for their industrial nation is and the pollution that sometimes is created. They look at it as a clean source of fuel. So at the end of the day, the other elements that we can affect are, quite frankly, the costs that happen out here, whether it's the real estate taxes or the costs of fertilizer and chemical, and the restrictions that sometimes are placed on it for good reasons, but sometimes aren't thought out in terms of how they will affect our farming community or our landscaping community or anything else. So, that's, I would say that rules and regulations and the real estate tax structure are probably some of the main areas that we can have a positive effect on the bottom line for agriculture.
Other questions?
We can do 20 minutes of closing.
Sure.
Oh, Mr.
Give me
Div.
your opinion on the new clean slate expungement law that could expunge up to 500,000 criminal records in the state of Minnesota, including some felonies.
Were you a cop or something?
I just think it's important for employers and society in general to know if you have a criminal background or not.
Yes, and as an employer, I would like to know that too, especially for the type of employment that I do. And we send people into banks and law enforcement facilities, and they like to have a pretty good idea of what. This happened at Cottonwood County too, where my podcasts go off. Really enlightening stuff in there. Yeah. To be perfectly honest, this was something that wasn't hugely on the radar in the legislature. It happened and it got through, but I don't remember long discussions or really long floor debates on this. I think it just kind of, from what I can recall, which is very little, that this was kind of slipped in with that. And so I'm still trying to wrap my head around the ramifications of what that means for us. But overall, I don't have a positive opinion of doing that. I understand why there would be advocates for it, but I wouldn't be amongst that group.
Yeah, I certainly, I think the comment Joe made about it being something that got slipped in is exactly right. It's on a national basis, as DEI has been pushed and what have you, this is the results of them feeling that this has to be done, that no longer should you hold people accountable for the mistakes that they made and the actions that they took, that they aren't to blame for it. Well, I don't agree with that, and I think it's pretty safe to say that none of the three of us voted for pretty much anything that went through last year, but yeah, it's something that, quite frankly, puts businesses and the public at risk.
Well, I think it kind of started when you were no longer allowed to ask if somebody you were hiring was a felon. They took that off of, you cannot ask that on a job application. So it's just a little bit more. Not that people can't change and not that people can't make their lives right. I get that too, but everybody should be able to see both sides of it. And you should be able to make that as an employer, as that decision as an employer, if that is the case. So like they both said, it was under the radar, not discussed a lot. So another frustrating thing that got crammed down all of Minnesota's throat once again.
Yes.
Next year, paid leave goes into effect. And they've already backpedaled on the voting. Do you have any confidence that the new estimates have any accuracy?
They've already gone up, and they're going to continue to go up. And this is one thing that the schools have already said is going to hurt them tremendously. As a business owner, I know that and we're a small business, and it's just going to be another tax, and it's going to be a tax on the employee and the employer. So not only will that not help either one, it's going to take-home pay is going to be less again. And I don't think the benefit's going to be as great as the cost.
I unfortunately don't have a lot of confidence in there. I think over the last few years, we've seen a lot of agenda-based forecasting for not only programs like this, but just the state budget as a whole. And so there's optimism when the program is something we like, that we can keep it at a reasonable cost. And then when something doesn't happen or is something that we don't like, then all of a sudden those costs are more expensive than what they actually are. And so I'm spending time now trying to understand that better. I know a few years ago I sat down with some of the forecasters to understand what their assumptions are, how do they get to the numbers that they get to. I need to do that again because most of those folks had retired and we have new people in that are making different assumptions, and I need to understand that better on what they're going from, to understand the credibility for what they're offering with that. But all that to say is, no, I think there's a lot more optimism in the program that keeps the costs lower in their projections because they want it to.
Like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be my 13th session. When I came in, my first session in 2013, MNsure was just coming into play. It was a debacle as far as the state getting it implemented. Then we had the car license debacle, and the only reason that got somewhat straightened out was the fact that the Senate forced upon the Governor Dayton at that time to bring in an outside consultant to go through and figure out what was wrong with the system. And so now we have this new program, which they estimated they would have to hire 400 new state employees to manage. And we're supposed to be comfortable that they will make it work. You know, I have no confidence in their estimates whatsoever. And you know, we had actually proposed in the Senate a plan that would have, and I think someone in the House did too, that would have if made it available through a private insurance program. And because there are companies out there that actually know what they're doing as opposed to the state of Minnesota. But oh no, it can't have that, you know, and reducing that need for 400 additional employees. And I have no idea if that number of employees is right or wrong or what have you. I just am confident that the system will get botched up.
Mike, did you have something back there?
Yeah, you know, I've heard a lot today about, you know, blaming everything on the last couple of years, you know, and the other party, and I frankly have the same blame too. But as leaders, what are you gonna do to try to bring, you know, in the Senate and the House, there's what, 1 or 2 votes difference? You know, there's gotta be moderates on both sides that can come up with a better plan. It may not be the ultimate plan, but there's gotta be where, you know, we could make life better in southwest Minnesota. I mean, if you start cutting LGA and county aid and school aid, you might as well just pound the nail further into our hearts out here in southwest Minnesota. Because we're already losing to South Dakota, to Iowa, to Nebraska, wherever. But, you know, are you working actively on both sides of the aisle to come up with common sense solutions?
It's working together to find common sense solutions is how can that be done potentially is where Mr. Cooley's going.
Well, the reality of it is that both sides have to be willing to come to that end of things. For the last 2 years, there was no consideration of our position whatsoever. And at the end of the day, you know, to have a successful bill, both sides have to feel that they won. And unfortunately, as I said, there was no desire for that. They were just going to cram through what they wanted to cram through, hope against hope that the people of Minnesota wouldn't punish them for this, and you know, and so we are where we are. You know, over the years that I have been there, Mike, I have always been willing to sit down at the end of the day and if this is what we needed to do to get us across the finish line, as long as there were things in there that I could accept. You know, I've lived in split government my entire career in the Senate. The first 2 years, they had the trifecta. The next 2 years was the Republicans in control of the House. The next 2 years was the Republicans in control of the House and the Senate. And then we started going back the other way again. So I've been through almost every combination that exists. And people on the other side have known that if they approach things realistically, that they could count on me to come forward and help get the ship going down the course. But you know, there has to be give and take, and we have not seen that for the last 2 years in any way, shape, or form from the other side. So. Yeah, we can manage to get that done, but there has to be moderation. And yeah, we have the extreme conservatives on our side, they have the extreme liberals on their sides, and quite frankly, if you're willing to moderate at all, they're going to come after you. And I just simply say, hell, bring it on. Because out here, it's the people of my district that are the ones that I have to look out for. But I'll be honest about it. As we get started here, I'm not going to be as easy to get along with as I may have been in the past, based on what I've experienced these last 2 years. And they know that too.
Well, we're going to have a irritated Senator Weber for the next 4 or 5. Anyone want to add anything on to that?
Well, being at my first 2 years, I can tell you that they would say they would want to work with us, but I never personally saw them trying to work with us at all. And I didn't just vote no on everything because I wanted to vote against the Democrats. I voted no on stuff because it wasn't right for Minnesotans. I heard many things from people in my district that don't vote for this, don't vote for this. So we need to work together, and there's not a want to work together with the other side. But they also have to be willing to look at what we're doing and stop hurting Minnesota for a small group of people. And like I said, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a tough road, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah, and on those same lines, over the last few weeks, I've spent more time talking to the Democrats that are in the committees I'm involved with and the Republicans. I know where the Republicans are at on this stuff, and so just trying to understand, because I know even though we have a 67-seat majority, at the end of the day, we're going to have Democrat votes just to pass anything that comes out of the House, and then it has to go to someday DFL Senate this session and then the DFL governors. So we don't get to just put together anything we want, pass it, and then negotiate it out from there. We have to negotiate it from the first day, and so trying to figure out what the thought process was on some of these things ahead of time, and knowing that I can work with reasonable people. I'd try to measure people as I work with them. As long as they're willing to work with me, I'm willing to work with them overall, and that's worked out really well. You only get 1, maybe 2 shots with me, though. If you start to move the goalpost on you, like the state government does to local government all the time, then I just can't work with someone who's not negotiating in earnest. And so it's that approach that I take, and also just thinking towards that end time. I know that there are more in our caucus right now who are thinking, let's get our positions out there in the first few weeks, since we have control with a few open seats. In the human services area, we just don't have time to do that and get the work done that needs to get done before the end of the year or before the end of the session. So just really desperately trying to make sure that I can get people on board to get a budget passed that can get bipartisan support.
Anyone else want to ask anything, make any comments? Otherwise, we can begin we've turned 20 minutes of closing into 5 or so we're...
Challenge accepted. No, I'll just thank you again for the opportunity to come here. This is a pretty annual event here, and it's good, one, to kind of get the thoughts back into the session. You know, I have to prepare for this ahead of time and think, well, what are the issues really going to be? What might I get asked about? What can I get prepared for ahead of time? And I'll be heading up for this session starting tomorrow, so I can get things prepared ahead of time. We don't start until the 14th, but you got to get your running shoes on and hit the ground running when you get there. So just really thank you again for making it out this morning. It was chilly. It still is chilly out there, and so that extra effort doesn't go unnoticed, and just appreciate it.
Thanks again, everybody, for coming today, and it's always good to hear from constituents. It's how we do our jobs better. One thing I can ask is that you all say prayers for all of us as we head up into session again, because that is the most important thing that we can receive from you, aside from your feedback. My faith is what keeps me going up there and keeps me headed in the right direction. So keep contacting us, keep paying attention to what's going on, and keep asking questions. And thanks again.
Certainly, thank you for being here this morning. And, towards the end of session last year, a lobbyist came up to me and said, Senator, how do you come to work each day up here knowing that what's going to happen? Because in the Senate, it was 34-33, 34-33. They pushed their will through, and I said, well, you know, my people didn't send me up here just to quit. They sent me up here to represent them, to state their values, to state their beliefs. And I said, as long as I am doing that, I said, I consider each day a success, even though I may not win the vote at the end of it. And so with that, I also thank you for your support. Continue to let us know. And just don't always assume that because we're up there, we know what may be happening in every single committee. We serve on certain committees, we focus on what's coming through, but until some of these bills wind up getting brought to the floor or more discussion on them, you know, we in caucus will have, oh, this is happening there, this is happening there, but we may not be fully aware of what's going on. And so never hesitate to let us know. Can't guarantee you I'll have an answer for you, but I will find out. And with that, thank you all.
Okay, I imagine that you guys are going to be sticking around for a little bit and visiting. We thank Mr. Schomacher and Mr. Weber and Ms. Fogelman for joining us today. And will you be able to watch this archived, or so people can tune into Studio 3 and watch it later if you missed an answer or something like that. So my name is Ryan McGahee. I don't think I introduced myself, but most of you know who I am. Thanks for all coming out this morning, and we'll see you maybe for a mid-session report. We'll see.
Gee whiz.
Yeah, you're in trouble now, Joe.
Sorry.